I'm giving a talk on business model innovation, and it's beyond, it's the next step after you develop your product and develop your service or your business. How do you make money? And so I will go a little bit more about this. For those of you who don't know, I'm on the expert advisor panel for the Future Enterprise work group for the EU. And let me tell you a little bit about myself. This is not letting me change. Okay, there. So about myself is I was born in Taiwan, and I grew up in the U.S. And I'm an engineer by background from Stanford and a business degree from UC Berkeley. I did start my career working for three big companies, in fact, three of the largest companies in the world, Exxon, Pepsi, and AT&T. Exxon and Pepsi, I was an engineer. I did projects, I did packaging, and at AT&T, I did sales. And for everyone that is out there looking at entrepreneurship, if you can have a role in sales, even for 6 months, it really, really helps you in creating a startup, because a big part of the startup is selling your company, okay, so. Okay, then after I worked for large companies, I then went and worked for startups. So after I left AT&T, I was involved with 7, 8 startups, and I advise several startups even now. One of the most important things is a lot of the startups had some positive outcome. We made some money, we got sold, but very importantly, there was several failures. And one of the things about Silicon Valley is that failure is highly respected, because with failures you actually learn a lot. And so right now my biggest focus and passion is to support entrepreneurship around the world. And that's one of the reasons that I'm an advisor to the Future Enterprise work group. Right now I am a board member of the MIT Stanford Venture Lab, which is a high-tech forum supporting entrepreneurship in the Bay Area. We actually presented Google, Yahoo, a whole bunch of companies, Facebook, all during the early days when they still weren't known. And we helped to connect them with investors and with the media, so they really helped them to grow really fast. As of January, I will become joining the industry faculty at UC Berkeley, and I will be teaching a entrepreneurship boot camp, which I'll talk about later. And lastly, I run a company where we do entrepreneurship and innovation and business development consulting. So moving on from here is business models. So, besides having a killer product, people are talking about business models. And what is it about? It's really about how to make money. It's not just about generating revenues, but it's how do you be a profitable business. Okay? It's about moving from value proposition to value extraction. So value proposition is focusing on creating a product or a service that has value to a customer segment. So the value proposition addresses the need that some customer segment has, and it may solve the customer's problems and make them very happy. But what's missing from that is, how do you make money? How do you be a profitable business? Because without being a profitable business, your startup cannot be sustained. So you have to move also, after value proposition, to value extraction. How do you make money and be profitable? There's a lot of historical business models to be referenced. And the historic ones is, of course, to buy something, to license your software, to rent something, and advertising. Advertising, was really hot 10 years ago, but now it's getting to be quite historical type of business model. Everyone knows about it, and we can only, as a customer, receive so much advertising. So the innovative business models are the ones that are really catching investors' attention. The innovative models, what they do is they transform processes, they identify totally new ways of making money, and with the digital world and the internet, it's enabling a whole new realm of business models. Like eBay now allowed you to auction online. Spotify allowed you to stream music over the internet. Solar City, all these new business models, and a lot of them were enabled because of the internet and the digital world. So one thing to talk about in this world is that over history, we've seen a lot of trends, okay? 50s mass production, the 60s aggregation, 70s specialization door-to-door, the 1980s the built-to-order, just-in-time manufacturing, direct-to-consumer, and then in the 90s the internet revolution. And with all these market trends out in the world, new companies emerged to meet those trends. Like, for example, with the ability for mass production and production lines, companies like McDonald's emerged, Toyota, Ford, and then with aggregation in the 60s, you saw mega stores forming, like Walmart, which is like the superstore. And I think in France, Carrefour's is a superstore. And then in the 70s, you got the specialization in door-to-door. You had companies like FedEx, which basically specialized in door-to-door delivery. In the 80s, companies like Dell, you could order your computer made to order. You ordered specifically what you want. They built it and sent it to you exactly with the configuration you wanted. And then we all know the 90s. So then moving on into the 2000s, some of the trends that we see in the 2000s is, of course, wireless and also gaming. Games are big. I mean, it's impossible to find someone in their 20s who hasn't played either a game on their phone or the game on the internet or on the console. So moving on from here is I want to talk about some of the concepts that you should think about when you're trying to develop a business model. What are some of the basic principles? One of them is to identify who has the dollars. Like, here's an example of a product. A university in Taiwan developed a special organic pesticide for worms, and it was for worms that would eat the tea leaves in Taiwan. And the logical customer for that would be the farmers. After all, the farmers don't want the tea leaves, the tea crops, to be destroyed by worms. But the problem was the farmers had no money, and they couldn't afford to buy yet another product for their crops. They were barely making money the way it was, and so they couldn't buy it. And Chaoyang University had developed a really good value proposition, but there was no model for value extraction. So they struggled and they struggled, and they finally found someone who had the money who wanted to pay for it. So what happens is Chaoyang University, found the tea companies, the tea retailers that sold these beautiful boxes of tea for $100. What they did was they bought the pesticide, and then they gave it to the farmers and told the farmers to use it. The farmers used it. They kept the worms from eating their tea plants, and then the tea companies then took those tea leaves and marketed them as organic tea, and then charged twice as much. So in this case, the customer that immediately came to mind wasn't the customer because they had no money, okay? But the university identified who does have the money, and for them, they needed a new product to sell, to charge more money, and by buying the pesticide, giving it to the farmers, then the tea companies had access to what they called organic tea leaves, which they could then sell for twice as much. So let's go back to basic business math, okay? When you're thinking about the business model, you have to go back to this equation, and this is basic business math, just like physics and is the foundation of engineering. Business math is the foundation of business, and it's all about making profits, and profits is equal to revenues minus costs. So anything that you do that affects these variables, profits, revenues, or costs, actually affects your business model. And so in thinking about elements of your business model, it's what do the things that are part of your business model, how do they affect these three variables? So business models are not easy. A lot of companies have come up with super great products and have super big adoption, yet still struggled with making money, and in some cases simply have to close down because they don't make money. So, for example, in 1998, this was the Google search page in 1998, okay? And it was free. So how would they make money? People were used to doing search for free, and then how were they going to turn those millions and millions of users into paying customers? And so what happened was the invention of Google AdWords changed everything. What the Google founding team and the leaders did is they asked their employees, come up with ideas for us to make money, and we'll review all the ideas. And one of the engineers came up with the idea of selling words or selling search words. A customer could pay more money. They auction off. Whoever paid the most got their brand associated with a search word. So for example, if Pizza Hut and Domino's Pizza both wanted to be associated with pizza searches, but Domino's Pizza paid more money, they bid more money, then Domino's Pizza would show up more often when people did a search for pizza. And now Google makes over $66 billion of revenue a year, and 2/3 of that revenue is from the website search business. Let's take a look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a huge social network for business people. It's basically online resumes. For many of you in Europe, some of you use their biggest competing product called Viadeo. And right now, LinkedIn, besides advertising, they looked for additional revenue models, and one of their revenue models is that they sell services to recruiters and headhunters, so in finding employees for companies. And they're making about 30% of their revenues for services to recruiters who are hiring people for their clients. Okay. Another company is Twitter. I mean, Twitter has I don't know, I don't know the exact numbers, but probably 1 billion users for Twitter. And it's one of the most well-adopted social media platforms in the world. But Twitter is having business model challenges. Their revenues are not meeting their projections. They haven't figured out a really good business model yet. And as a result, they're not making the money that they projected they could make. And as a result, this last year, the CEO of Twitter was fired by the board because he did not, under his leadership, Twitter still had not developed a really profitable business model. So moving on, just some other concepts is that business models can change, especially over time. So if you look at this LaserJet printer, 1992, this is the first printer that I bought. It was $2,000. And for those of you in the audience who were born after 1992, you probably cannot imagine spending $2,000 on a printer. But during this period when printers first came out, companies like HP made their money from hardware. So what they did is sell hardware at a big margin. In today's world, you can buy an HP printer for less than $100. So how's HP making money? And you probably know because you spend a ton of money on ink. So what HP did is from 1992 to 2015, they shifted their business model from making money from selling hardware to making money from selling supplies like ink. And one of the points that HP did is the reason they changed their business model is that recurring revenue has longer lifetime value. What happens is if it's a one-time sale, they sell it in 1992 and the ink is very cheap or it lasts a long time, then they don't make very much money other than the first time. With a recurring revenue, people keep buying ink, and guaranteed after 5 years, you have spent more than $2,000 on ink. And HP has made more money over 5 years than they did doing a one-time sale. And another thing is that in this world, nothing is really free. Okay, because when you offer a service or offer a product, it takes money to deliver the service. It takes money to deliver the product. And if people give it away for free and don't get anything in return, they're not going to sustain as a business. So here's an example. This is a Greek restaurant in Maastricht, which is in southern Netherlands. And I was there for a conference, and I went in, and look, it said free Wi-Fi. Wow, I can log into Wi-Fi and have my dinner and get free Wi-Fi. Great. But then, as I logged into the free Wi-Fi, you didn't just log in. You had to do something. You had to log in with Facebook, or you had to do some other steps, okay? Finally, you logged in with Facebook. You had to like the restaurant before they would let you access the internet. And so what it is my Wi-Fi was not free. My Wi-Fi required me to log in to Facebook, like the restaurant, before they would let me get to the Wi-Fi. And one of the things is that if you read about advertising, a Facebook like is actually worth $174 in advertising. So what that means is if I like the restaurant and my friends see that I like the restaurant, they're more likely to go. And that's more effective than if the restaurant spends $174 in Google advertising or magazine advertising or radio advertising. So I actually, in return for the free service that the restaurant gave me, I actually gave them $174 in advertising. So nothing is really free. Somebody's paying for it somehow. So now here's another very important concept. Who are the customers? What people think initially is the customer is the user, right? The person who uses the product. You always design your product for the user. So let me give you an example. These are pizza rolls. They're these nice little snacks that we have in the US. And one of the customers is the user. That's my son. When he was younger, he loved pizza rolls. Okay? So he was one of the customers. But another customer was myself. Okay? I was the buyer. Okay? And I bought lots of pizza rolls, and my son grew big on pizza rolls. And then lastly, another important customer in the value chain is the partner. In this case, the grocery store. If the grocery store did not carry the pizza rolls, it didn't matter if he wanted to eat them or I would buy them. There was no way for these to be sold if you didn't have a partner. So one of the things that's very important is as you think about your business, think about who is the user, who is the buyer, and is there a partner required? And if all three roles, make sure you understand who plays each of the roles and make sure that you reach them. So the next concept is make it easy to collect money. Okay? If you look like in Kenya, they've got a payment system called M-Pesa, which is payment by mobile, because everyone in Kenya has a mobile phone. So it's easy to transfer money using a mobile phone system. While a lot of the people in Kenya don't have bank accounts. So you can't do transfers between banks. Or, your cash isn't as easy to carry around or whatever, or it's easy to be stolen or lost. So the key is to understand your customer and how they typically have money. So a really good example of this is Dell. I bought my latest computer from Dell online, and then when I looked, I was just completely impressed. They were willing to take my money with a credit card or a debit card. They would take money and give me a credit account where I could set up a payment system to Dell. They would take money from PayPal. They would take money from a gift card. And then lastly, what really shocked me is that you could even pay for your Dell computer using Bitcoin. So, the fact that they were going to get, Dell was going to get your money somehow. They were going to get it out of your bank account, out of your PayPal account, or out of your Bitcoin. They were going to get your money, to sell you their product. So one of the biggest challenges of business models is overcoming barriers to adoption. Here's a company, a solar company. They sell solar power systems to homes in the US. It's a big upfront cost to customers. It's like $50,000 US. It's a huge barrier to adoption since most people don't have $50,000 to pay for. So Solar City, another company, came up with a more creative way for people to buy a solar system. You could buy it, of course, like wholesale solar, but you can also lease it. So basically, Solar City bought the equipment and they leased it or rented it to the homeowners. And then what Solar City did is they got revenues from the lease. And when a solar system generated more electricity than what a homeowner used, that electricity could be sold back to the utility. And Solar City also got revenue from the utility company for generating energy that the utility company could sell to someone else. So with Solar City, what happened is their business model addressed a barrier to adoption. They made it much, much easier for the customer to buy. And secondly, they identified a new revenue stream and accessed that revenue stream of the utility company paying for excess generated energy. An example more in the software world is if you look at, there's a company in Poland called Accents. They've got like 1 million users, and what they do is a suite of network administration products. So what they do is they give the network monitoring module for free, and it gets people to use that network monitoring module and think, wow, this is a good product, this is a good company. And then they upsell a premium price for the full product. So when you buy the full product, you then get all the other modules like the hardware inventory, the user monitoring, the help desk, and the data security. So this is called the freemium business model, where you start by giving something for free to get the customer, and then you move them up, you upsell them to buy the whole product. So moving forward, what I'm going to do is just cover some of the emerging business models that we've seen in the last 10 years. And the big point of this presentation is to get you to think out of the box about potential new business models that you can look at as you launch your startup company, or as you help if you're in an incubator or a university, to help some of your students and some of the entrepreneurs in your incubator think of creative new business models, new ways to make money. And for two reasons. One, you may access new revenue streams that people didn't think about before. And then secondly, if it's a very innovative revenue stream, it will really get the investors' attention. So one of the areas which has become really huge in the last 10 years is collaborative consumption. So Airbnb is probably one of the best examples. It started out as an idea for people to rent out their rooms in their homes or renting out their apartments because they weren't using them. And so if someone had a home with multiple bedrooms, they could let other people use their, consume, collaborative. You could let other people collaborate in consuming what they owned and make money. And so now Airbnb is over 190 countries, and over 15 million nights have been booked on Airbnb, and Airbnb has a $1 billion plus valuation. And it's not just with your home that you can do this. In Silicon Valley now, we have models with cars. So you go to work, you park your car. It sits there for 8 hours while you're working. Now you can rent that car when you're not using it. So people can come in, they have a system where they can rent your car online, get to your car, type in a code, and they can drive it. They can drive your car, and your car can make more money than sometimes even you while it's sitting there and you're working. And then relay rides, the total business model, covers the insurance, covers payments, settlement, so that it's a complete business, and the customer who needs a car can have a car when they need it, and you have a car that's sitting there doing nothing all day that can make money for you. So another one that's very, very popular over the last 10 to 15 years is crowdsourcing. And we all live in a world right now, there's too little time, not enough resources. And so you can harness the power of the crowd for a lot of things, for not just content, but for processes, brain power, funding, and more. So here's an example of a company that used the crowd to reduce their costs. So eBay. When eBay first started out, eBay now has this crowd and community service for providing ratings for buyers and sellers. So basically, if I'm going to buy something on eBay, I'm going to look at the reputation of the seller. And if the seller's reputation isn't very good, I'm not going to buy it from that person. And then, so basically, and same thing for the sellers. So both people will choose to make a transaction or not based on the ratings of the person they were looking at doing business with. Excuse me. So one of the things to point out is originally eBay used to have an escrow service. Is that if you bought something on eBay, I, as the buyer, would send my money to eBay. eBay had to have a system to hold the money, and then the seller had to send me the product. I would then say, I received the product, I'm happy, and then eBay would release the money. So eBay used to have this escrow service to handle the money until both sides were happy. And they no longer have this escrow service because people it's all handled by ratings, and people decide whether or not to do business because of ratings, and they no longer need this escrow service. And what it has done for eBay is it greatly reduced the costs part of that business model equation. So because they reduced costs, the profits went up since it's revenues minus costs. And then we all know user-generated content. I mean, YouTube was bought by Google. And YouTube, how could you create a whole site that was worth hundreds of millions of dollars and you'd not create any of the content? But that's what they did. They got the users to create the content. And there's magazines now where it's all user-generated content. And this is something I think all of us are very familiar with. But there's other ways, the other things that you can crowdsource, not just the content. An example is the Crowdsource Brain-Power. So if you see this presentation, this is my Facebook page. And my very first version of this presentation was actually because Future Enterprise asked me to talk about business models last year, like a year and a half ago. And it was in July, and it was 4th of July in the US, which is a big holiday. So I was too busy having fun and didn't have enough time to really sit down and think and write the presentation. So I crowdsourced it. And I sent out on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter and asked people for ideas about the most innovative business models that they'd seen in the last 10 years. And people just sent me all these ideas, and I used a lot of the ideas to develop this presentation. Another example is this company called Foldit. It's a scientific company. They're trying to solve the problem of how to fold strands of DNA so they fit compactly. And so they understand how DNA is folded inside a cell. But this is a very iterative process. It's not something that you can really have a machine to solve. It has to be done, iteratively, ideally by humans. So they created a game called Fold It, where people could go on and, it's like a Rubik's Cube. They'd sit there and play with it and fold the DNA to get it to fit. And they marketed this across all these science classes in the U.S. And so all these students were playing a game, having fun, and at the end of the day, they were actually helping this company solve a scientific problem. So if you make it fun, and you can actually get people to work for you for free. And then, of course, crowdfunding. Crowdfunding's really big now. You have Indiegogo, you have AngelList, you have you have all of these Kickstarter, and more people are doing crowdfunding. Here's an example. This is a company from MIT. They have this device that measures certain elements of your body, like temperature, like flow, signals, things like that. And it helps to identify the potential of epileptic seizures. This company on Indiegogo just raised $782,000 on Indiegogo. One thing that I would like to make sure that you don't just put something on crowdfunding and expect that people are just going to come and throw money at you. But in addition to putting something on a crowdfunding site like Indiegogo or Kickstarter, is you also need to support it with a lot of marketing. So people know about it. People get excited about your product or your company, and then they go there and invest money. So it's very important to accompany your crowdfunding posting with a lot of marketing. And if you look at Indiegogo or Kickstarter, they actually have a lot of tutorials and training materials on how to do crowdfunding. So the last big trend in business models that I want to cover is monetizing data. Okay, so right now monetizing data is like on fire in Silicon Valley and a lot of the rest of the world, but mainly in Silicon Valley. People are figuring out how to collect data and how to make money from it. There's a company called Blue Kai, and it actually originated from Stanford. It was a Stanford master student who did a project with HP. And they developed a solution, a product that could go out there and scour the web for trends. It would collect data on trends on traffic, trends on patterns on user behavior on the internet, and they packaged that data and sold it. Like they made like $300 million within 5 years simply going out to the internet and collecting data on trends and behavior and packaging it and selling it. And last year, Oracle bought Blue Kai for hundreds of millions of dollars. So as you can see, Oracle, who you all know as a software company, is now moving into the monetizing data world. Here's an example of just a simple mobile app. It is a Blue Kangaroo is a shopping app, and it personalizes for the user and makes recommendations of good deals, sales, good products, and makes recommendations on the phone. So if you have Blue Kangaroo and you're walking by your favorite store, you might get a message saying, hey, H&M, come into H&M. You know, we've got, if you come in now, we give you a 50% off coupon. But the interesting thing about Blue Kangaroo is that its business model is not the traditional referral fee or revenue share. Because most shopping apps, they make money by getting a referral fee from the merchant or getting a revenue share for the user spending money, and the merchant shares some of the revenue with the app. Blue Kangaroo is actually, they've got 5 million users. They're collecting data on the 5 million users. Which ads do they click onto? Which stores do they go into? And they're actually doing a data model where they're collecting data on their users, identifying trends, packaging it, and then selling that data. And Blue Kai, actually Oracle, and they're having Oracle as their sales channel to sell the data and the trends that they collect. So you see the models like are evolving. You know, now a shopping app is moving from a referral fee now to the monetizing data model. And if you look at Google, I mean, a $66 billion company, and supposedly all their services are free, but remember, nothing is free in this world. So what Google is doing is their free services, they're collecting our behavior data, they're analyzing it, and they're monetizing it primarily by knowing what you like and delivering advertising about the areas and the products you're interested in. So Google search, nah, it's not free. They're taking your data. They're not taking your money, but they're taking your data and helping the merchants take your money. Google Drive, Google Glasses, Google Wi-Fi, it's all about collecting data and monetizing it. But here's the interesting thing, is that selling data is not a new concept. So grocery stores, they have barcode readers, they scan your products as you go through the line. And one of the first stores to install barcode scanners is a store in California called Safeway. So Safeway installed these for inventory control. So these barcode scanners, when they first were installed, were on the cost side of the revenue. They were a cost that they had to put in order to manage inventory. But then somebody in Safeway realized all this scanning we're doing, we're actually collecting data. This data could be valuable. So they actually took the data that was collected for inventory control, aggregated it, analyzed it, and started selling it as market research. And so what they did was they took something that was a cost and turned it into a revenue stream. So something that they already were doing, they took it from costs and made it revenues. And that really positively impacted the profits part of the equation. And now Safeway's going crazy. They've got Safeway apps, they got Safeway on the iPad. They're doing all this stuff to collect more data on its shoppers and be able to package that data and sell it to the product companies. An example of a European company, Skin Vision is a Dutch company. They have a service called Skin Vision where you can take a picture of a mole or something on your skin, and they have a database, they have an engine that helps you to identify whether or not this is something to be concerned about. And it compares with their huge database of other skin patterns, skin lesions or something, and allows them to say, hey, this is something really critical, and they can share it with the doctor. And so what they've done is, in creating the service to help patients identify if they should be concerned about some skin mole or something, they've also collected now the biggest database of melanoma, and that it's a valuable database which now they can then license out to healthcare providers around the world to help them in monitoring and diagnosing and treating skin cancers. So just a quick comment about business models is we often talk about licensing. And there's one element, one point I'd want to make is about the difference between licensing technology versus selling licenses. So, for example, Bell Labs developed a holographic storage solution technology. They licensed the technology to a company called Aconia. This is a startup company called Aconia. And the licensing can be a one-time license for the technology or monthly or yearly. And then now Aconia is a startup which is launching the commercial product to market. So this is the situation where you're licensing technology or IP. Another area that is often termed licensing is software. Like Norton has developed an antivirus software. And when you buy Norton for your computer to do it, you're actually buying a license to use the software. And it might be a yearly or multi-package license. And the license model for software provides recurring revenue. So though both these situations use the word licensing means very different things. So when you look at the licensing model, okay, understand carefully are you licensing technology for someone to develop a product, or are you licensing something like a software or licensing something else as your actual service? So I'm coming to the end of the presentation, and I thought I would end with something fun. One of the trends that we see in the last 10 years is a lot of games, okay? I'm sure all of you have played games at some point in your life. And so can you imagine that you can actually be paid to play? So here's a picture of me, and this is my son with a customer. My son is an engineering intern. He's going to college and then working part-time as an engineering intern, and he's making $1,800 a month as an engineering intern. He works really hard. You can see him. He's all covered in grease. And then you have his cousin. This is my son's cousin, Patrick. Patrick dropped out of school, and he's playing games. He plays games all day, and he makes $2,000 a month. Like, what is wrong with this picture? I mean, my son, he's an engineer, he's working long hours, yet his cousin, who is playing games all day, is making more money. So my son is like, Mom, you really hurt me by not letting me play games. So how does this happen? This happens because of a company that came up with a very innovative business model. So you see this company, Twitch. So Twitch developed a service where gamers can go and broadcast their gaming. They broadcast how they play, and other people can log in and watch the really good gamers play. And on some of the gamers' broadcasts, you see 10,000 people watching that gamer play. And what Twitch does is they sell advertising around the really popular gamers broadcasts. And they sell a lot of advertising because there's a lot of people watching the best gamers. And so, and another thing is the gamer has a chat box here. And the gamer can tell his followers and his fans, hey, you're watching me. You should donate some money. And they'll show their PayPal account name, and my nephew, who you saw there, gets hundreds of dollars a month from people donating money to his PayPal because they feel like they owe him something for watching him play. And so Twitch right here was acquired by Amazon for almost $1 billion. They were actually acquired for $970 million of cash. Google bid $1.4 billion, but it was in stock. And so Twitch decided to go for the Amazon deal. So a service that allowed gamers to make money playing was sold for $1 billion. So one of the morals of this story is that the younger generation always figures out how to make money doing something that their parents tell them not to. Like, for example, you look at Bill Gates. Bill Gates' father said, son, you need to stay in college. You need to graduate. Bill Gates didn't listen to him, started Microsoft, and later on, Bill Gates' father ended up working for Bill Gates, running the Gates Foundation. So when your younger people, your children, start coming up with some ideas, don't always tell them, no, you have to do it my way. They may be coming up with really interesting new innovations and innovative business models. So one last thing I wanted to run by you, I told you, is I am going to be teaching a class at Berkeley on entrepreneurship. It's called the Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship Bootcamp. It's on January 11th through the 14th, and I would like to invite the people, the participants, and the people from Future Enterprise to come join this boot camp. It's primarily for students, but we're also opening up slots for entrepreneurs and professors and incubator managers from around the world. And you can email me if you're interested in attending. So, thank you very much. That's my email if anyone has any questions. And I'm going to put it back in the mode where we can have some questions. Hello.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really fascinating, Gigi. I really, really liked that. There were a couple of things that might feed into sort of future versions of this that were triggered off by it. One is the transformation of eBay from what used to be considered an auction to being more or less a pure intermediary, and the disappearance of escrow and the contracting out of consumer protection services in the form of PayPal protection, which tends to run off separately, is, I think, an interesting example of how these things evolve. The other one I wanted briefly to mention was that another area of monetization of data that's of particular interest has to do with weather derivatives and cat bonds, because when people started using weather derivatives, HDD and CDD puts to hedge against climate risk, governments began to join in by sharing through open data models a lot of public weather data. But these data were not particularly of good resolution, and everybody had access to the data. So because there was proprietary interest in better data, Monsanto has recently started really quite a large initiative to provide superior data, which is only valuable because people have sort of generic public data. So those are sort of two things that have come off the back of the kinds of transformed business models you've been talking about, where it's not necessarily the zero-sum thing of how does the business get money out of the customer, but it is things that create value to which all different kinds of players can contribute. I think the things you had in your discussion were really very nice examples because they illustrate that general principle. So I just want to mention those two anyway.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jonathan. Does anyone else have any questions?
One last thing about playing games and getting paid for it.
Yeah?
It might be worth mentioning these kids in South Korea who make tons of money playing games using somebody else's avatar to get them up a level or 12 or 500. Because that's been going on for about 6 years now. And they are apparently commanding some fairly serious, not just money in the cash flow sense, but building reputations there in the same ways other sports became professional and then became marketing platforms.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things that the kids are doing now is some kid who's a very good World of Warcraft player will move up and build an account that's very, very high up and then sell that account to a new player so the new player can start off a lot higher.
Yeah, I suppose that's sort of what we do at universities, isn't it?
Yes. Is there anyone else that has questions?
I can see a question in the chat from Vasya Kara. She asks whether there is a reason behind startups growing mostly in the US and not in Europe, and she's asking whether funding is more in the US is the main reason behind that, or because facilities and low costing infrastructures exist there compared to Europe.
Startups are not being more successful than in the US because of funding, because what happens is in the US there may be 1,000 times more funding than in Europe. However, there are 10,000 times more startups going for the money. So the money may be more than Europe, but the startups are 10,000 times more. So in essence, the percentage of people going after the money is a lot bigger. So it doesn't have to do with funding. A huge part of it has to do with the mindset and the ecosystem. So in California, in Silicon Valley, almost everyone is part of the ecosystem. They're excited about it. Your lawyers will help you. Your accountants will help you. People help each other. And everyone's very excited about being involved in it. Okay? And so you get a lot of community support. And then the other element, huge element that I feel like is a big part of the reason that the U.S. has so many more successful startups. And I've spoken in 19 countries this year, so I've seen a lot of countries, and especially numerous countries in Europe, is the culture. And there's several elements of culture that help the United States, the U.S. startups be more successful. One important one is that they're willing to take risks and they're willing to fail. And they fail, they learn, and they start another company. And it's easy to say that because in the U.S., failure is respected. Financially, you are not harmed long term. If you go bankrupt, there's the financial regulations allow you to start over again within like 3 years. While I know in Europe, it's not the case. You lose a lot of your reputation. You're not allowed to be on boards. And so a lot of it's a culture, the willingness to take risks, the willingness to collaborate, and the willingness to empower people. If you look at Google, what happened is the bosses, the founders, didn't say, we need to create everything of value. They asked their staff, come up with ideas for us to make money. And in the end, they chose an idea of just a lowly engineer. He wasn't a manager, he wasn't a director or a VP. He was just a lowly engineer. And I want to give you another example. Is you saw Twitch. I just talked about Twitch and how that was very successful and sold for $1 billion to Amazon. Twitch, the way Twitch started was there was a company called Justin TV. They had developed some really cool technology on streaming. Justin TV deployed that as a streaming service. But that streaming service, Justin TV, did not make money. And so what the CEO did is the CEO told his 3 vice presidents, take our technology and you each start your own business, okay? And let's see which one catches on in the market, which makes money. And so Twitch's technology spun out of a parent company whose technology and business model was not working. So the VP that conceptualized Twitch took that technology and transformed it in a new business model that then made money. So a lot of it is I think the big things that the U.S. succeeds is really the culture and the ecosystem and the community around the startups. And if anyone wants that presentation, I actually gave that presentation in Greece in March 2014. And so if anyone wants it, send me an email and I'll send them that presentation.
Hi, Gigi. This is Sotiris.
Hi, Sotiris. How are you?
Good. I see we have another question in the chat, so I'm going to read it out to you. It's from Emily Johnson.
Okay.
She cannot speak because it's a noisy room. That's what she said. But before going to that question, if anyone else has another question to ask, please use the chat box. So I'm reading Emily's question. She says, we have seen many innovations that happen in sector or areas where there is fertile ground, but others like Uber, which go head-to-head with unions and established bodies that constitute closed markets, are the other way. So these are not well accepted in Europe, and legislation does not help. So she asked, how open is the US in such attempts? And what does it count more to make a success in such closed sectors? Is it huge funding, business models that include existing workers, or what?
Right. Well, so here's the thing. Like, in the U.S., companies like Uber are the ones that would typically hit up against regulation. Because the attitude in the U.S. about win-win-win, okay, is you want everybody to win, and especially the customers, especially the consumers. And so in many of the cities, is the consumers said, you know, we're happy, we like the service, we want it. And the politicians realize, you know what, if this is what our constituents want, we have to allow it. Maybe we'll figure out some ways, rules we need to put in place to keep them safe. But that is part of the reason I think the U.S. is more open about those type of new innovative services. I'll give you an example in the Netherlands. Is initially Uber was illegal in Amsterdam, okay? And what happened was Uber was illegal in Amsterdam, but then Uber did a strategy where they said, Uber drivers, you go out, you go out there, you drive, and if you get caught, if you have fines, if you have tickets, we will pay them. So the Uber drivers in Amsterdam went ahead and they kept driving because they didn't have to worry about the fines or the penalties by the government because Uber covered them. Then one of the things which I think was just hugely progressive on the government side is the government did a survey of the inhabitants in Amsterdam and asked them, you know, about their attitudes towards taxis, their attitudes towards Uber, and what they heard from the inhabitants is that we like Uber. The customer service is much better. You know, we can find a taxi when many times we were stranded and couldn't find a taxi, especially when it's raining in Amsterdam. It's horrible when it's raining there. And basically the residents say, we like Uber, we want Uber. And so Amsterdam changed their laws. They allowed Uber, however, they put in some restrictions which protected the consumers. Like, for example, now, if you want to be a Uber driver, you have to go get training and pass a test to, you know, drive a commercial vehicle. You know, the same tests that taxi drivers have to do, and things like that. So, in the end, Amsterdam listened to the residents and opened up to Uber after hearing that the residents said, that's what I wanted. And in my mind, it just showed a real progressiveness on the government officials in Amsterdam. I hope that answers your question, and you can always email me if you want more clarification or discuss more ideas.
Okay, from what I see, we do not have any more questions. Do we have any final of them?
Just a quick comment on the Amsterdam thing. That notion that if something makes sense to the citizens, the government will put its back into it or support it, is a pretty typically Dutch notion. It's happened in the past. When they had window frames, they developed a kind of window frame that was recyclable. And the government, being the largest purchaser of window frames for public housing, which is very big in the Netherlands, originally there were concerns, competition policy concerns, because it was 4 large manufacturers or builders who came up with these window frames, and they also owned the recycling plant. But they were so much better that the government said, we will now mandate that all new buildings have to have these window frames. So that idea that consumer protection or citizen interest is a valid motivator for regulation and policy is more true in some parts of Europe than it is in others. Whereas in places like Paris, for example, the entrenched interests of particular incumbent groups, whether it's the farmers or the taxi drivers, do seem to have quite a lot of influence on policy. And it may be that there is a route forward if the new businesses include in their new business models the delivery or assistance with public services that these new technologies can provide, because that might convince governments, particularly cash-strapped governments, that it might be worth exploring self-regulation, co-regulation, the other things that kind of open things up to new models.
Right, exactly. And then one of the things to mention about the Netherlands is, though it's a really small country with 16 million people, they've had a disproportionate share of successful startups, like Bookings.com, like TomTom, like Shapeways, which is a 3D printer company that is now headquartered in the U.S., is, maybe it's that mindset of being more customer oriented, and in the case of the government, being more open to what the residents want, creates a better culture to promote entrepreneurship. And so you see a high number of successful startups from the Netherlands, given its small population.
And that may also work to ease some of the concerns, for example, the privacy concerns. Mm-hmm. Since the collapse of the Safe Harbor Agreement, there has been some consideration that perhaps the, let's say, the social business model of new forms of capitalism will create a demand for increasing rather than decreasing regulation. But it may be that if you open up that discourse, that these problems get solved, for example, by businesses themselves adopting codes of conduct that are perhaps less abusive than people are afraid of.
Hey, Jonathan, you're there in Europe. You get to lead the discourse.
I do have a government position, and within the very, very strict limits that it imposes on me, I am indeed trying to do exactly that.
Fabulous.
So I guess we don't have any more questions.
Fabulous. Is that Soteris?
Panagiotis.
Okay, Panagiotis. Okay, wonderful. All right.
So thank you, Gigi. Thank you very much for your presentation.
And Panagiotis, I will send you a PDF version of the presentation, and if you want, you can share the PDF version with the participants.
Perfect. Then we will have a follow-up email to all participants, including the PDF presentation and maybe some minutes based on the questions that were made. And as Gigi has said, she can be contacted anytime through her email. And thank you very much for participating. Have a nice evening or day if you are in the US, whatever. Thank you again once more.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good meeting with Tom Kosnick.
I will. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Gigi.